We deal with hazardous materials more often than we realize. At home and at the work site. On the shop floor, in an office, or outside, almost all workers are in daily contact with chemicals. Some are toxic or dangerous in other ways if they are not properly handled. Many chemicals have become so much a part of our lives that we don't even think about the potential hazards. There are ways to protect ourselves from hazardous materials. Enclosure of the process. Local exhaust ventilation. Safe work procedures. And if these systems alone cannot provide enough protection, personal protective equipment. But these kinds of activities and safeguards may not be enough. Sometimes, injury or illness occurs because people don't have enough information about the hazard. Employers, supervisors, and workers have rights and obligations regarding hazardous materials at the work site. But fulfilling responsibilities requires knowledge. WHMIS, the Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System, a Canada-wide system designed to communicate information to workers about hazardous materials at the worksite. So whether you are a supplier, an employer, or worker, if handling hazardous materials is part of your work, then WHMIS, its labels, material safety data sheets, and worker education is a part of your safe work environment. In 1982, a group representing government, labor, and industry set to work. Their objective? Give workers a standardized method of finding out about the hazards of chemical and biological materials. The result? WHMIS. Why is such a system necessary? Picture this. On the shop floor, a tube being patched. Nearby, a worker fills an unlabeled container with sulfuric acid. Called away, he leaves the unmarked jug near other similar containers.
You want to get me a jug of water? There's one on the workbench there.
Another worker reaches for what he thinks is a jug of water, and a hard lesson learned about clear and specific labeling on containers. Or in the lab, a technician accidentally burns his hand with caustic. What is the proper treatment?
I just got caustic all over my hand. Turn on the water, Margaret.
Don't wash. Doesn't water just make it worse?
Precious time lost for lack of adequate information and training. Or, how often does this type of inadequate and contradictory worker education take place?
Oh, one more thing. Remember to be careful when you're working with paint thinner. It's got toluene in it. It won't kill you, but it can cause problems, so don't stick your hands in it. And if the fumes get bad inside, put on a respirator. You'll find one in the toolbox in the locker. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me or one of the other technicians.
Okay, thanks. Isn't that stuff supposed to be dangerous?
Nah,
I've been using it for 10 years. Never done me no harm.
Besides, cleans the paint off a lot better than the stuff you're using.
These are common situations. A need for clear labeling, a need for adequate information about a chemical, and a need for consistent training in handling the chemicals at your particular worksite. WHMIS is a system. Minimum requirements that must be met. Hazardous materials covered by WHMIS are called controlled products. And whatever the size of the worksite, every supplier, employer, and worker who deals with controlled products must understand at least the 3 key areas of WHMIS: labels, material safety data sheets, and worker education. Labels. Controlled products for sale in Canada must have a WHMIS supplier label. This label, attached to the container by the supplier, alerts the handler that the product may be hazardous. All WHMIS supplier labels, except those on some laboratory chemicals, must have this border. What's on the label? The product name, the nature of the hazard, precautionary measures to be taken while using the chemical, proper first aid procedures, the name and business location of the supplier, reference to the material safety data sheet that we'll be talking about in a few minutes, and 1 or more hazard symbols. Supplier labels must have WHMIS hazard symbols. There are 8 hazard symbols in WHMIS designed to tell you at a glance the kinds of hazards which exist when using that particular controlled product. Let's look at each of them. This symbol, a simple drawing of a compressed gas cylinder, means the material is under pressure and may explode if the container is heated or damaged. This indicates either flammable or combustible. It's important to keep these materials away from sources of ignition, such as an electric heater, a lighted cigarette, or sparks from metal striking metal. This symbol means an oxidizing material. It will cause flammable materials to burn more vigorously. Corrosive materials, for example acids and caustics, will cause chemical burns if they come in contact with skin or eyes. Corrosives can also damage pipes and other metal containers. Products with this symbol are extremely reactive and unstable. Some react violently with water. Others explode if bumped, dropped, or heated. Finally, these 3 symbols for poisonous or infectious material. The familiar skull and crossbones symbol signifies a material that can have immediate and serious toxic effects as a result of a single exposure. This symbol, a combination of a T and an exclamation point, is used for all materials that have other types of toxic effects. These may be immediate effects such as skin or eye irritation, or long-term serious effects only apparent over time. Materials with the potential to cause cancer or birth defects, for example, would have this symbol appearing on the label. And finally, this symbol identifies materials that are infectious. They may contain bacteria or viruses that can cause disease, or may contain the toxins or poisons created by these organisms. Some controlled products require more than one of these symbols. This combination means a compressed gas, which is flammable. This product is corrosive and flammable. And this combination is corrosive and an oxidizer. There are thousands of different chemicals, and they all have different properties. Remember, supplier labels and their hazard symbols are the first alert in WHMIS. Often it's necessary to transfer controlled products from their original supplier container. Wherever this is done, another type of label called a worksite label must be used. Worksite labels include at least 3 pieces of information: identification of the product, information for safe handling, and a reference to the material safety data sheet for more information. In addition to all container labeling, any company that handles controlled products in other ways, like process piping, must also develop an identification system. Different systems may be used by different companies. Some companies, for example, use bands of colored tape on process piping to identify the product contained within the pipes. Clear and specific labeling, a critical aspect of the safe handling of controlled products. The second area addressed by WHMIS is material safety data sheets. A material safety data sheet, or MSDS, provides further information on a controlled product, its properties, potential hazards, safe handling procedures, and what to do if there's an emergency. Suppliers must provide a material safety data sheet for every controlled product they supply. Workers or anyone using a controlled product should familiarize themselves with the information on the material safety data sheet. The MSDS must contain certain basic information, including hazardous ingredients, how the material can get into your body and toxic effects, how exposure can be controlled, procedures for safe handling, first aid measures, emergency procedures, and how to contact the manufacturer or supplier for more information. Since the MSDS is written for use by several different groups, if there is some information which you don't understand, ask. Material safety data sheets must be readily available at your worksite. Some employers have developed different methods for storage of MSDSs. Remember, it's every worker's right to see the material safety data sheet for every controlled product he or she may come in contact with at the worksite. The MSDSs must be accessible at all times. Having them locked in an office or filing cabinet is ineffective and illegal. The MSDS, part of a safe worksite strategy. Labels and MSDSs are 2 of the 3 main parts of WHMIS. Worker education is the third. All employees must receive training in the Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. WHMIS training involves a basic explanation of how the system works, the kinds of things we've been discussing here. Workers must be taught what information is required on WHMIS labels and MSDSs, and the purpose and significance of that information. WHMIS worker education must also be worksite specific. The specific training depends on the nature of the job and the materials involved. But WHMIS worker education is more than just methods of use. It will include information regarding special storage and disposal procedures, what to do in an emergency, and proper procedures in case of an accidental release. Training will also include information on controlled products which are covered under other legislation, such as radioactive materials and explosives. Proper handling procedures with these materials must also be clearly understood and followed. It's every worker's right to be properly informed and trained regarding the controlled products they work with. It's the employer's responsibility to ensure this training is provided. Workers are responsible to participate in ongoing WHMIS worker education. That's the law. Worker education will only be successful if workers can apply the information they receive to protect themselves and their co-workers. WHMIS is a common-sense approach to worksite health and safety. Suppliers provide worksites with the necessary information on hazardous materials. Employers are responsible for ensuring that all controlled products at the worksite are properly labeled, MSDSs are available, and that an ongoing WHMIS worker education program is in place. The workers use that information to protect themselves and their co-workers. WHMIS will have a dramatic effect on the ways companies operate and the way workers do their jobs. The nature of your job as supplier, employer, supervisor, or worker may require you to become familiar with some of the more specialized parts of the system. WHMIS plays a significant role at our work sites. Carefully reading supplier and worksite labels, reviewing MSDS information, putting worker education into practice. It all takes time, but safe handling of controlled products is an essential part of any safe work policy, of any systematic reduction of occupational illness and injury. WHMIS, the Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. WHMIS, working for you.